Okay, so we're live. We're doing the bonus topic. This is a first for the show. We're going to see how this goes together. Again, if you're watching this on Patreon, I want to thank you for supporting the show. If you're watching this on YouTube when it's eventually uploaded there, I want to say you're a freeloader and give me money. But no, I'm just kidding with you. Thank you again for my panelists for sticking around for this bonus portion. Let's go ahead and get right into it. There was a story that came out where this photojournalist was essentially caught posing a girl at a Brussels memorial, and he got caught because he was in the background of a broadcaster who was doing a stand-up with a news reporter, and he was blatantly having the girl, I think, put a teddy bear back onto the memorial site. Now, of course, there's been a lot of the photographers responded, and there's been this back and forth where he's like, he was doing this to try and recapture something he saw, and he wasn't selling this in the news media, and trying to make all these essential excuses sort of to defend himself, saying like, this is the reason why I essentially gave up my integrity as a photojournalist. So what are your thoughts on these, panelists?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care what excuses there are. I don't see any reason in a news event like that to pose somebody. I mean, even if I'm trying to think of the craziest scenario I can think of. Let's say I went down there with a friend and like wanted to make a photo of my friend at the memorial. I mean, that's so sort of classless. It's like you would never do that anyway. So it's within a couple of days after this horrible terrorist attack, and at an event where there are a lot of people around, and there's people, and it's a memorial, and people are sad, and it's just, I don't see any reason why you would do that. I don't care who he's working for, what he's doing. I just can't find any reason in my head why that's okay.
Yeah, it just shows lack of commitment to the craft. And I mean, if you wait around there long enough, there's bound to be a moment you can capture. And yeah, so to me, it's just unacceptable.
I mean, it kind of goes back to what we talked about on the other show, is that sort of the lack of training and the lack of sensitivity, and I mean, I heard like, yeah, there's that argument. Well, he wasn't working for a news organization, and even I've heard people say, well, everybody's a freelancer now, and so a staffer gets paid either way, right? So whether they make a picture or not, so they can sort of afford. And I mean, that is sort of the sad state of the industry now, in that you know photojournalists have to like do something to generate to make something better so that they get paid. I mean, that shouldn't be the case, but even if that is the case, I don't know. I just have a hard time wrapping my brain around any good reason to do that.
Right, and the story said that he was like a self-trained, photojournalist. He's never been to any school.
He's a kid, right? He was young, like in his early 20s.
21, I believe. 21?
Okay,
but he's won like $15,000 in a photo contest.
I mean, he's a great photographer. I mean, he's got a great eye. It's just.
But doesn't it make you question everything that you see of his work now?
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, I haven't gone to his site, I haven't looked at his work, and I hate to pick on this one guy, but obviously he's sort of the focus of this story. But there's a lot of people that are probably in the same situation. Having seen that, it's like any news picture that I see on his site, you have to question it. And I would be reluctant to hire somebody if I was in the position where I was hiring a photojournalist. I would just question it. And there's it puts everything into doubt that you've done. I mean, we've had these scandals at newspapers where, a reporter or a photographer gets busted for doing something, immoral, unethical, and then they have to go back and pull all of their images and pull all of their raw files, and because a good, journalistic organization will do that, whether they're covering their butt or not. It just, there's no public trust anymore, and there's no, even within the photojournalism community, there's no, you doubt everything at that point. Once that happens, that's all it takes.
Yeah, right. And it's like people can get away with it because, again, there's no more gatekeepers, so to speak. It's all open.
Yeah. If somebody was looking through his take, and looking at every image, because he's self-editing, right? Everybody self-edits now. If an editor was looking through every frame that he shot, they would immediately be able to tell. I mean, you'd tell this happened. She stood up. She went back down again. Whatever. It's like you'd totally know.
Mhm.
And I don't totally blame the photographer because it's the system that he's sort of grown up in or growing up in. Hopefully this is a good lesson for him, but and for others in the same situation. But that the whole system is kind of broken down. If the only way we know about this happening is because he was caught in the background of TV footage.
It
What if
makes
you
me.
told somebody that, hey, I posed that photograph, by the way?
Yeah, that's no big deal.
Probably not.
It makes me think about all the most of the images that we see from Syria and a couple other conflict zones are now basically, you hear about, basically they're just activists that Reuters doesn't even, I think it's Reuters that have made the official stance that they're not sending photographers in there. At least maybe they started that up again, but they just sent camera gear to activists on the ground who would go and get photos. And you go, I have no idea how, especially since it's digital, you can delete the photos before and after and give them the selects that you want to some extent. And I get where you don't want to send a photographer into a really extraordinarily dangerous zone, I suppose, but
that's what they do, though, man.
Exactly. I have to say that's why I went into this industry. I did not go into this industry to take 50 photos for $150. Sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, you say that, Zach. But are you willing to go to ISIS territory as a photojournalist and be where they're cutting off heads?
You're not going into. I mean, obviously, unless you have some perfect in or whatever. I mean, I got friends who, back when Al Jazeera had tons and tons of money, they got just tons of money now. A friend of mine, Rick Rowley, is Academy Award nominated filmmaker. He did the film Dirty Wars. He was covering both sides of the conflict. He was in Afghanistan. He got embedded with. Or is in both of them, but in Iraq he was covering guys that at any given moment were on the U.S. side of the war or possibly being bombed, taken out by a drone. So I mean, they're there. I mean, ISIS, I think to an extent, ISIS is almost a whole different game now. But I mean, if you're telling me I get to run with the rebels or something like that, I mean, I'm maybe not. I would have to prepare myself because I don't know a word of Arabic and I don't know a word of anything.
We used to go. The photographers I know that do that kind of work, they go for training. I mean, there's combat training, and they go in and they, so they can at least have some idea of, how to protect themselves and how to stay as safe as possible. But look, the James Nakways of the world, I mean, they put themselves in extremely dangerous situations. It's not something I want to do. I have no interest in doing that. But you need people who want to do that. And it goes back to what we've sort of been talking about all night about, true photojournalists who it's more important for them to tell the story and to get that out there into the world than even their own life. I mean, we've lost a lot of great photographers over the years covering important stories that the world would not know about otherwise.
Yeah.
I just think it's there's the era wherein, you could go into the enemy territory and they would respect that you're there as a documentarian, but I think with the environment that ISIS creates, doesn't matter. You're just gonna chop your head off because you're an American.
That's why I think there's a big difference between ISIS and say going FARC, in Colombia or something like that. And I mean, FARC in Colombia has a bad record as well. But if you made the relations, I don't think that I know there's a handful of journalists that have supposedly have gotten in with ISIS of different groups or whatever, and have been able to get out is the more importantly thing. But I mean, I think ISIS is kind of the one group these days. I can't think of another even historically that is it's just not a no-go. It's just.
But if somebody ever does get in there and do a real journalistic look at what's going on there, I mean, all we see are the promo videos that they put out and the couple of I mean, we don't really know what's going on back there, and it's going to be up to some enterprising journalist is going to do it. I mean, somebody's going to eventually do it. It may not come out for years. It may not, who knows? But
it'll probably be someone from Vice. I mean, we all know that.
Sure, it could be. No, they're doing great work.
No, they are. I got a buddy who's their top FOIA investigator. So Jason Leopold, it's fantastic. Yeah. So, but it is to go back to the story though at hand. It is there. I mean, where do you guys draw the line? If you saw a person do something, Would you ask them to do it again? Like if they held a sign in a certain way and be like, oh, could you do that
God,
again?
no.
Would you?
Wow.
No, I'm literally I'm asking questions here, not actually giving defense. No, because it's interesting.
You're playing devil's advocate.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
I mean, yeah, in a news situation, no. In a marketing situation, that's completely different.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And look, I covering a Bon Jovi concert, right? If I've got some fans in the aisleway, and especially if it's somebody I know or whatever, and I come up and I've got a camera, they're gonna change what they're doing. They're gonna react for me, and maybe they didn't see me, their friend sees me, oh, go do it, and it's like that. That certainly happens, but that's completely different. A news situation.
It's how do you treat? Because I notice I do this. I don't cover a lot of concerts, and I don't cover anything for the most part, other than. Occasionally I'll cover like political conventions, stuff like that. But for the most part, it's like protests, potential for violence sort of situation. But the few times like I got assigned out of the blue to Electric Daisy Carnival, which was my first like outdoor concert I've ever covered, and that was a nice crash course in that, considering both of my cameras got destroyed, and it was a whole fun story.
Sure.
But where is your line of journalistically, like, your journalism line? I mean, because I absolutely treated EDC maybe not completely different, but very different than I would treat even a political convention or even a thing.
For me, it's not as much what the event is, it's who I'm working for. So if I'm working for a media outlet, if I'm working for a news organization, a newspaper, something like that, then it's a news situation, and I won't touch anything. I won't, if I'm working for the festival to produce promotional pictures and to promote and to make pretty pictures that are going to, their marketing department's going to use, that's different. I will happily pull somebody and, say, hold up that sign for me and stand right there in the good light, But if I'm working for, a wire service or a newspaper, no way. I wouldn't touch anything. Not at all.
Tess?
Well, David, you mentioned something earlier about you photographing at concerts, and you talked about how the crowd would react to you, right?
Sure.
So you don't consider that manipulation of images?
I mean, again, it depends. That's in that situation. I'm talking about working for the band, or something like that.
Let's say it was you weren't working for the band.
Yeah, I mean, it's a touchy situation, because even in a news environment, people do react differently when there's a camera there. We can pretend we want to be a fly on the wall all we want, but people absolutely do. So part of that is you have to use your own judgment, right? I mean, it is a gray area, and every situation is different. So I don't know that I can give you a hard and fast rule, but if somebody starts acting in a way that's completely different from what they were doing before I was there. I mean, I saw the scene before I walked up there, and if I walk up and they start doing something completely different, I won't shoot it, because if they start mugging for the camera, I'm not going to shoot that. I'm going to put the camera down and say, hey, thanks, and walk away. So in a news situation, that's sort of the most general way I can put it. If it's a minor thing that they were doing, and then I walk up and maybe they put their sign down and they see me and they hold the sign back up again, and it's pretty much exactly the same kind of thing, but I didn't ask them to do it, but they kind of did it. It's a bit of a gray area there. And it's a judgment call. That's a journalist's judgment call. Am I truthfully documenting the scene in a way, that's telling the story that's actually happening? It's a judgment call you have to make on site.
Yeah, because I'll say, I mean, I've been in situations where either being photographed or me photographing somebody else. Like, if I'm being photographed, I know, like, as a photographer, I know the photographer wants something from me or me to do something. So I'm not necessarily purposely giving him a shot, but I am thinking about the fact that there's a photographer photographing me and I'm reacting differently, just because it's just almost subconscious. But when I'm shooting something, and I was taught this, back years ago, 'cause, like, let's say you photograph a kid and they're laughing or reacting because you're there, but it's a great shot because it's a great reaction shot of the kid doing something. It's like, how much of that shot is really happening and how much of that shot is you creating that shot? How is that different from, essentially posing a person in a, putting a bear in a memorial?
I remember hearing a talk years ago at the Eddie Adams workshop. I was a student there in, I don't know, it was Eddie Adams 6, I think it was 1993. Anybody, if you ever have a chance to go to Eddie Adams, absolutely best experience of my life. But what's his name? One of the old like New York Post photographers, like literally the guy who wore the hat with the press thing in it. Ouija, I think his name was. You know, they're the old school Graflex, you know, speed graphics photographers, and they just back then they just had no, they were just trained, they didn't have any sort of moral, any ethics at all, right? And I hate to paint it with such a broad brush, but he told a funny story without any shame about some kid who there was some negative story about a kid, and he went to the family's house to do a portrait of the kid, and the kid was happy, and the kid was all, and he's like, I can't do anything with that. So when the parents looked away, he said he slapped the kid, and the kid started crying, and then, you know, this was in like 1950, right? Slapped the kid starts crying, he made the picture, and that was the picture in the paper. You know, we all just go, oh my god, I can't believe that. But you know, obviously it was a different time back then, and that's way over the line, and it got a big laugh from the crowd, but you know, because nobody could believe it. But obviously today you would never even, you know, for so many reasons you wouldn't even consider doing something like that. But yeah, I just still think it's a judgment call from somebody, you know, who sort of can weigh both sides and make that decision.
Tess?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's very situational, and like David said, I think who you're working for is the main judge of that. For me, that's been my documentary has been my passion, and so whenever I manipulate something for marketing purposes, I feel this like little tug in my heart. Like, what am I doing? Is this okay? And so just upholding to that is very situational for me.
It's funny because it was a shift for me when I went freelance, because I was a newspaper guy, and then, you know, I was raised in that environment, in that world, and I never really thought about sort of the beauty of the subject or anything like that. It was all about documenting the scene, and it is what it is. And you try to make them, you know, a picture that tells the story. I always like telling the story in one photo. I was not much of a photo essay guy. I like to nail it all in one picture, and just you could look at it and you know the story. And then when I went freelance and started doing more jobs where the client is also the subject, you know, where a celebrity maybe is hiring me to do a portrait of them, or, you know, a record album or something like that. That's a big shift for me, because I would have, you know, this amazing photo, and the clouds opened up and birds are flying out of your butt, and it's just like this perfect image that's never going to happen again. And the subject says, oh, but my nose looks weird, you know, and it's like, oh, you know, but that's, if that's the client, then you know what, that picture goes away, and that picture's not going to be the one to get published. So so it really does depend. It's situational, depending on who you're working for, who's paying the bill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Zach, did you want to add to that?
No, I guess I'm fine.
You seem like you're biting your
something,
tongue.
and then I literally lost it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, this has been our bonus topic of the week. We talked a little bit about this, so thank you again for supporting the show and getting this little added info. Hopefully you liked it. Hopefully you're enjoying this extra content, and we'll try and do this again next week. Otherwise, again, I want to say thanks to the panelists for taking the extra time out to do this, and we'll have you hopefully here next week. All right. Well, have a good night, everybody. Thanks again.
Right.
And I'm out. Stop by.